Okay, we are so excited that after many months of stalking that we have Dennis Byrd here in the house. If you guys don't know who Dennis Byrd is, and I know a lot of them already do because he is island famous, he is the owner of The Spot on the seawalls. Been there for how long? 20, 30, 40 years now?
In 1998 it opened, yes.
So I'm sure many of you guys have had cheeseburgers after a long day on the beach, but he has so much more to tell us about his story, how he got there, and what he is doing today. So let's start with the now. How many locations do you have now? I know it's more than just the seawall.
Yeah, so we operate 6 properties now, and then we have 8 different concepts and or brands under that umbrella.
Okay, what are the brands? Because I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so we've got 3 locations of The Spot. We've got a couple of hotels, a DoubleTree Hotel, a Holiday Inn Hotel, and then we've got half a dozen bars. So 4 of them sort of sit on the property on Galveston's beachfront. We've got another one at our DoubleTree Hotel that's also open to the public, and we recently opened a bar location in Houston Hobby Airport.
I was just about to ask if you were at IH. I thought I heard something about an airport or some sort of announcement. So how was that?
It was exciting. It's growth. And so we're always excited about growth. We opened a store in League City in the fourth quarter of 2023. Then we opened a restaurant and a bar at gates number 1 and number 4 in Houston Hobby in the first quarter of 2024. And so we'll sort of allow those to ramp up and stabilize throughout this year and then look to continue to grow in early 2025.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I'm sure it's a big feat getting into the airport. I'm sure that's a lot. And with that, you don't get to hire your own or bring in your own employees. How does that work? You have to use all, isn't there like a staffing company with the airport that you have to use? And how does that work with like your management team?
Yeah, it's a totally different endeavor for us. These 2 outlets at Houston Hobby are our first 2 franchised outlets. So interesting way that it came about is we received a cold call at our restaurant that didn't get to me because my team thought it was a sales call. That call then came to our office, which again didn't get to me.
Well, they don't get to me either. I'm always in a meeting.
Somehow the gentleman got my cell phone number and then asked me politely to please not hang up, that it wasn't a sales call. And it was a company based out of Spain. They are growing their footprint in the United States across airports, travel centers, and stadiums. And they were submitting an RFP for Houston Hobby Airport. Throughout that process, that RFP required 40% regional or local brands. They did a market survey. And in our brand, The Spot out of Galveston ranked highest for brand recognition in their survey. So they reached out to us and said, listen, we'd like to partner with you. You could operate it or you could franchise it to us, but we'd just like to have a relationship. Since we had a store under construction, we said it's probably franchising is a better idea because we don't know that we can open 3 restaurants in 6 months. And we then sort of seeked out the best franchisor attorney in the country and said, hey, we don't know what we're doing, but we know what we want to do and we know what we don't want to happen. So help us build out that contractual obligation between us and the franchisee. And we've been open, I guess, 2 months there now, and it's been really great so far.
Do you plan on doing more franchising or keeping everything in-house on restaurants?
Yeah, so I think what we're going to need to do is try to open 2 or 3 more corporate stores in the Houston market of various footprints. So, we'll do something at 6,000 foot. Maybe we'll do an end cap in a shopping center, really put those metrics together to see what sort of, revenue per square foot looks like, build out cost looks like, and grow some corporate stores and then potentially do some more franchise stores.
Yeah, it's easier once you've done it several times to kind of get it all mapped out and exactly what the expectations are for the franchisee, making it a little bit easier to sell, I'm sure.
And then the franchise is it's a double-edged sword. You lose a little bit of control and you have to make sure that they hold up to your standards on your brand that you've built. And so I know that's tough.
I'm sure that's hard at the airport too, but with just the traction of all the people traveling, hearing your name, that'll make it so much easier when you take that step to franchise more.
It certainly is an opportunity that we looked at as a business growth opportunity and a marketing opportunity. So Houston Hobby Airport sees about 7 million visitors per year. Interestingly, that's about how many visitors Galveston Island sees. And
how many?
Wow.
7 million
per year.
Per year.
Wow.
And what's even more interesting about that is Galveston has roughly 400 places to eat and drink. Hobby Airport has 24. And so when you look at the critical mass of volume of guests walking through a location, but 90% less places to eat, the metrics really begin to work. You look at it initially and say, well, how are you going to generate the type of revenue out of a 2,200 square foot store, which is what we have at Gate 1.
Because it's like summertime every day in the airport.
That's exactly right. So Thursday, Friday, Sunday are your Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
So what are your busiest months out of the year? Because I'm sure it doesn't match up to retail like ours.
So it's interesting that the seasonality has been consistent amongst the 3 restaurants that we have open right now, and then the single bar and hobby. So we'll see really high sales in March. They'll tail off a little bit in April, grow again Memorial Day through Labor Day, and then go down again through the rest of the year. League City will have a little bit more volume in November, December, because there's parties and things of that nature that take place. But pretty much we've seen, interestingly to us, we didn't think it would happen, but similarity in seasonality amongst the 3 locations. And since Galveston is extremely seasonal with very, very high peaks and very, very low valleys, it's really set us up. We understand how to operate very well in that type of environment.
That League City location is a good spot. Did you end up buying the building or?
We did. So interesting story behind that. That location opened in 2014 as a Quaker Steak and Lube.
I remember.
Where is this at? On 518?
It's between 518 and 646, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 646 and 96, right off of I-45.
That's why I haven't seen it yet.
Great 45 frontage. So that opened up in 2014. It failed in 2017. So at the time, we reached out to the owner, who was also the operator, and asked him to buy it. He wanted to lease it at the time. We weren't interested in the lease. He leased it to another concept, which we again thought wouldn't work. COVID killed them. So 2017 to about 21, 22, they were in arrears on their rent.
What was it?
It was called Tight Ends.
Oh, okay. It was the,
like another
the Hooters.
knockoff. Yeah,
the Hooters knockoff. Yeah,
it was.
I do know exactly which building it is now. It's close to the theater.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Which is also probably great for you guys too, being so close to the theater. Is that theater still operational?
So
or is
they've
something
got
else
one
now,
just north of us. But what's happening on Bay Area Boulevard? It's growing north
Yeah.
and south. When you come on the south side of Beltway 8 on I-45, the next stop is El Dorado, which is effectively Bay Area Boulevard where the mall is. And so it's stretching north and south, which is impacting our sales positively. The rooftops are continuing to grow there. And so it's been a good store for us. It came out of the box really, really strong. Sales are continuing to grow, and we're really excited about that market. But interestingly, it was 10 years, maybe 8 years in the making, where we saw something in 2014. We liked the location then, and we were able to buy it in 2022.
It goes into what you said at the last podcast that we did, was just being patient and when waiting. Don't get emotional about it. You know it's going to be a good spot for you, but holding out. Someone's going to get desperate at some point and want to get rid of it. And I guess it wasn't leasing to anyone else. At this point, they're like, we have to sell it. We don't have an option.
Well, you probably didn't want to go through another failed restaurant, right?
Right. And so at that time, the owner was an operator. Then he became a landlord, didn't want to deal with the tenants anymore. And you're right, Gentry. I mean, business is transactional. There shouldn't be any emotion in business. You shouldn't be emotionally attached to your assets. I say that, nothing is for sale, but everything is for sale. I don't have anything listed for sale, but
with the right offer, it would.
If the opportunity presents itself, then you've got to take advantage of the opportunity. We haven't sold anything. I guess we've sold a little piece of dirt at some point, which we regretted. I would like to have that piece of dirt.
Was this the one on the seawall?
No. We had a piece of dirt in Galveston that we really were going to use to build a warehouse, and we sold it, and now we need a warehouse. So, we're leasing warehouse space, and we need to own warehouse space.
Well, I know you've known Sean for 120 years. You guys used to run the streets. We won't talk about those days in your 20s. And I've heard from Sean and some other people. I want to take it all the way back. I want to hear your story. Are you born on the island, whatever that coin phrase is? Are you from Galveston? And how did you get into the restaurant business? And we'll lead up to where you're at now.
Yeah, so BOI, I was born on Galveston Island in 1980 and went through the public school system there. And upon graduating Ball High School, went to LSU and then ultimately finished LSU and got into the hospitality business. And we can go into whatever the details of that is. I don't want to go at 10,000 foot. I know your listeners would like to know the details, and I'm happy to elaborate.
Yeah, I think one thing that people that don't know you would find amazing is that you worked at the restaurant that you ended up purchasing. So when you first got hired on, were you just a busboy or part-time, or how'd you get started in that business?
Yes, so that's exactly right. So I graduated high school and I needed a job during the summer to begin to save money to pay for college. So my parents had perhaps saved enough money to get me through a semester or two, but I knew that I didn't want to be a burden to them. They love me. They would have, leveraged the house in order to ensure that I got through college, but I didn't want to burden them with that financial burden. And so, yes, I took a job at the Spot. I was 18 years old. I started making cappuccinos at like 5 o'clock in the morning. Then I began bussing tables, washing dishes, cooked French fries, worked the grill, effectively worked every position in the restaurant that summer, graduating high school and then going to LSU. And then what I did for the first 2 years at LSU is I scheduled my classes on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and I would come home and work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
So you were, how the hell did you even study? What was your degree in?
Well, so the first 2 years were a challenge, and it was because they were general courses that I didn't feel added any value.
Yeah, waste of time. Biology.
Right. Biology,
chemistry,
anthropology,
yeah.
dairy
Yeah.
science. I mean, things that didn't add any value. And I didn't know what I wanted to do then, but I knew that wasn't doing it for me. And so the first 2 years, I didn't do exceptionally well in college, in part because I wasn't engaged in the classes, and in part because I had to come home and work 4 days a week. But that set the foundation of hard work then, which is the same foundation that we have today. And I don't want to jump over it. So those 2 years, I was able to work as many hours as I could fit in those 4 days. The owner of the restaurant had taken a liking to me, saw what I was doing, and he said, "Listen, you're a hard worker. You just come and work as many hours as you want." My second 2 years in college, my junior and senior year, I just got incredibly lucky. I studied international trade and finance. I took Arabic as a foreign language because everyone else was taking Spanish, French, and Italian.
That's random.
It's random,
Yeah.
but I like doing things that...
Do you still know any of it from Habibi Hayati?
It's been a while. I could hold a very brief conversation today.
So what were you thinking when you were going to school there? What were you thinking you were going to work for, the ship channel or something? I mean, where did you think you were going to get oil and gas?
So I thought that I would get a degree in international trade and finance. And that's because I was probably 13 or 14 years old at the time. I had a successful uncle. We were at my grandmother's house for either Thanksgiving or Christmas. And I said, "Hey, Uncle Johnny, what did you study in school?" And he said, "I studied international business." And so at 13 or 14, I said, "Okay, that's exactly what I'm going to do."
I want to be like that guy. Copy paste.
At the time, I mean, that was the most successful person that I knew. And I said, "Oh, I want to do whatever he did." And so I studied international trade and finance. I thought that I would go work in a World Bank and I would do foreign currency exchange. Didn't have any idea what that meant then. I have no idea what that means today. I ultimately didn't do that because I didn't get any great job offers.
Well, the girl that I introduced you to up there, who's also from Galveston, her stepdad is very successful in business, like I was telling you, and she's going to school currently for I think that same degree. I'm like, what are you wanting to do? It's some kind of international business degree. She's like, I really just don't know.
I don't think anyone knows when you're 20, 21 years old. You really don't know. You're like trying to pick something for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
it's really hard.
I remember that being one of the most stressful times of my life, being 16 years old at the time, and having to choose what my career path was, and I'd never done an internship or worked anything outside of retail. And I felt so much pressure. I was like, forget this. I'm going to San Jack. And I'll figure it out from there. After 3 or 4 years at San Jack, I still didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. So back then, you didn't think restaurant was going to be your thing. Restaurants, hotels, any of that. That was not even in the spectrum. That was just a get you from point A to point B kind of thing back then.
That was the only thing that I knew how to do to then allow me to pay for college. So I ultimately did. I paid for all of the college. My first 2 years, my second 2 years, I got incredibly lucky. So I took this Arabic as a foreign language. The teacher took a liking to me. He's a former decathlete. He was in the 1984 Olympics, and he's a volunteer coach on the track and field team. And he says, "Hey, I notice you're going home to work every weekend to pay for school. Would you like an opportunity to work on the track and field team?" I respectfully declined because minimum wage at the time was $6.25 an hour. Maybe I was making $8 an hour. And it was more of a resume builder than a way to pay for school. And I told him, I said, transparent, I've got to pay for school, coach. And so, no, I respectfully declined. Perhaps it was a week or a month later, I don't recall, but he comes back and he says, listen, I'd like you to meet the head coach of the track and field program. I just think it would be a good opportunity for you. So at that time, the head coach was Pat Henry. Coach Henry's now at Texas A&M. He will go down in collegiate history as one of the most successful coaches in collegiate history. If there's a Hall of Fame, I don't know if there is, he will be in it. He won 19 championships at LSU. I think he's gone on to win 20 or 21 at Texas A&M. Before that, he was at Blinn College and won championships. And before that, he was at the high school level and won championships. So this is a gentleman who his entire career has won. And I said, well, I'm not going to miss the opportunity to meet him. I meet him on the track. I go into his office and he says, what do you know about track and field? And I said, Coach, I don't know the first thing about track and field, but I know how to work hard. It's the one thing that I'm good at. And so I don't know what it is that you want to offer me, if there is anything you'd like to offer. But what I'd like to do for you is I'd like to just go out there and work. I don't need any direction. I don't need anybody to tell me what to do unless you would like to. But I'll work for a week and I'll come back and sit in front of you at the same seat and let's just have a conversation. And so what I did for that next 7 days is his office overlooked the track. So it was a separate building, but it overlooked the track. And I figured I knew what he drove and I knew which window was his. And so strategically, I ensured that I arrived every day before he got to work and I didn't leave every day until he left work. So a week later, I go and I sit in his office and he looks at me and he says, well, you were right. You work hard and I'd like to offer you an opportunity. I stood up. I didn't ask what the opportunity was.
You said, I'll take it.
I'll take it. I shook his hand and I said, I'll go get back to work. And he didn't tell me what the opportunity was. But ultimately, I received my next college tuition statement and it was $0. And then I received my book stipend.
Wow.
And it was fully paid for.
I don't know how much LSU was back then, but I mean, what,
Well, I'll tell you, it was I paid
$30,000 a year.
No, at the time, this is 20 years ago, more than that. My tuition at the time was $3,408 per semester. I remember it because I paid for it, plus books, plus food, plus housing. But it was an incredible opportunity. I was on that team for 2 years. We won 3 national championships in 2 years. So we won indoors, outdoors, and indoors again, men, women. I'd have to think about exactly who won and which years they were. But it's interesting that was meaningful and impactful to me then. In graduating college wasn't, because I held myself to a high standard. I expected to graduate college. So what I mean by that is, the reason why I say it is, I've never worn my college graduation ring, ever. It's 22 years old. It's in a box with a little white paper, sitting in a safe. I've never put it on. But for a number of years, I haven't worn them in years, but for a number of years, I wore those national championship rings when I went to events because there was a story behind that. It was a great story, the story that I just told you. There's no story behind graduating college. I went there. It was my money. I'm not going to fail because I'm paying for this.
But it was 4 more years of high school for you.
It was in a lot more expensive, right? So that was great. It was a wonderful experience. I still stay in touch with all of those coaches. I still stay in touch with most of those athletes, many of whom have gone on to have great success in representing our country at the Olympics, representing other countries in the Olympics, and going on to be coaches at other collegiate programs throughout the country, which is very, very interesting.
So what made you come back home to Galveston and not follow that path if you really enjoyed that so much? What put a fork in the road made you go back home?
2 things. So one, I took the GMAT test to go and get an MBA at LSU. And the entire time that I was in there, one of the coaches were texting me saying, hey, where are you at? Why aren't you on the field or on the track? And so I just pressed the letter C to get through the exam, completely bombed it. Again, I was focused on working hard. That was technically my employer as far as I was concerned. So I get out and I go to the track and I said, Coach, I was taking the GMAT. And he says, well, how did you do? I said, terrible. I did terrible. You kept texting me. So I just got through the exam. I bombed it. And he says, well, don't worry about it. we're going to put you on an athletic scholarship, and you can do your master's degree. You've got 2 more years. You don't have to pay that. You don't have to pass that until the completion of your MBA program, because you'll be under an athletic scholarship. I ultimately didn't do that because at the time, the gentleman that owned the spot was divesting of his holdings here in the United States, and he was making investments in his native homeland of Croatia. And so I reached out to he and his wife. I asked him for the opportunity to lease the spot restaurant with an option to buy it. Had no idea what that meant. I got on Google. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't have any money, right? And I got on Google and I said, well, this is what I think. I can lease it with an option to buy it.
But did he have it up for sale at that point? Or
He
it was
was
just in talks of doing it?
Yes. So he had already sold a few restaurants to Landry's. He had 2 restaurants left in Galveston, and he was looking to dispose of them so he could invest that money in Croatia. And so he's like a second father to me. I mean, still to this day, when we get off the phone, we tell each other we love each other. We talk twice a week. And he told me no 3 times because he said, look, you went to college, you worked your tail off. Okay, I employed you. You came home and you worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. You did all of that to earn yourself a collegiate degree, then go out and do something better. And so I don't want you to come back and work in a restaurant. You need to go do something better. And I said, well, look, Marion, I don't know how to tie a tie. I don't want to sit in a cubicle. And I got 2 job offers. One of them was from Coca-Cola, who wanted me to go and sell bottled beverages to convenience stores, driving my own vehicle. Not really interested. And then one was from American Express, offering to pay me like $25,000 a year. It's like, I'm not interested in either one of those things.
Were these like job fairs at the college?
That was exactly what it was. Yeah, it was a job fair at LSU. So on the 4th time that I asked him, he said, yes, I'll give the opportunity. Because ultimately there wasn't any downside. There wasn't downside for him and there wasn't downside for me.
Yeah, because if you didn't pay, he'd turn around and sell it. Yeah.
I didn't have anything to lose.
Yeah.
So even if I went in there and lost all of my money, which all of my money at that time was $10,000 that I had left over from an interest-free student loan from Frost Bank. It cost me $35 a month while I was in school, $100 a month upon graduation. So $10,000 in a dream. So I wrote my first month.
What year was this?
Had
it been like 2000?
2002.
Okay.
2002. So my first month's lease payment was $8,825.49. $8,825.49. Unbeknownst to me, I reviewed the trailing 12 financials after I signed.
That was my next question. Was it losing money when you bought it?
So it was losing $1,000 a day in the trailing 12. $365,000 it lost in the year before.
Okay, I'm curious. Why was a spot of all places losing money? Was it just quiet? Was it just the way that they weren't pinching the money where they should? Or why were you at that point? Not you, but them.
So they were investing in Croatia. And the owners were spending all of their time in Croatia. And you just can't,
They weren't babysitting
operate. It's a 7-hour time difference. It's +7. So you
They
can't
had
manage.
already bounced. They were gone.
They were there. They had bought. This is at a time where this sort of former Yugoslavia is moving from socialism to democracy. Croatia had broken apart from the former Yugoslavia. They said, now we're a democracy. We're no longer socialists. And so the government's divesting of assets. And so they pick up a very, very large pieces of dirt and hospitality assets.
So I'm sure now it's killing it because Croatia is so big with tourism right now. So really good choice for him.
They made a tremendous investment at the right time, and for us it was a tremendous investment at the right time as well. So I effectively had $1,000 left over, which is 1 day's worth of working capital.
Okay, so let's back it up. So of the $10,000 cash, first month you're like, oh fuck, here we are. So you pay of your $10,000, you give up $9,000, and that month you are like balls to the wall. You go all the way in, and you're like, everybody, let's get in tip-top shape and just looking where to cut stuff. What did you do at that point that saved you?
What's the first thing you did when you went in and it was already losing $1,000 a day? What did you go in and say, okay, this is what I have to do first?
Yeah, because you can't do that again. Next month you're gone.
Yeah.
You're working on the street corner.
Right. So interestingly, I signed that lease with an option to buy, but I was still contractually obligated to be at LSU with my equipment manager's scholarship that I had. So for, I don't recall, maybe 6 weeks, I managed the business by phone. You got to remember, I hadn't been there in 2 years because I had gotten this job on the LSU's track and field team. I no longer, so what I remembered was 2 years prior to that, I was working there. It was putting me through college. So it was a great opportunity. Well, I had no idea that in the 2 years that I had been gone, there had been a significant change. That change being the owners went to Croatia, there wasn't enough oversight in the business, and therefore the business had begun to fail. And so when I returned, that's what I walked into. So to answer your question as to what did I do first? Well, the first thing I did is I took a mattress and I threw it on the floor
Sounds
of
about
an
right.
office that was above the restaurant. That office had a small stand-up shower, 32 inches by 32 inches, a commode and a sink, and I moved in. That's what I did first. And I began to taste every menu item, do my best to shore up whatever was broken with the money that we didn't have. Tremendous people, Marion and Diane Dusich, who sold me the business. Diane Dusich showed up about a week after I had signed that lease with an option to buy. And she pulled up in front of the restaurant. She called me and asked me to come outside, and she handed me a check for $20,000. And she says, "You've got about 50% of the air conditions broken in there. I know it's hot. Fix the air conditions. Pay me back when you can pay me back." We ultimately paid her back within 6 months, but it was calling every friend that I had, not for a favor, but to say, I need help. I'll pay you, but I need help. So a couple of my high school buddies came out there and did landscaping for me. And they're doing that while I'm at LSU. And they're sending me pictures saying, "Here's what it looks like now, Dennis." And so I got there, I threw that mattress on the floor. I began to taste every menu item. When I got there, more than 40% of the menu, this is a counter service restaurant. You walk up, you order at the counter, so there's a menu board. And more than 40% of the menu was covered with Scotch tape and paper. Because
Real classy.
They didn't have the capital
to have it reprinted.
Or the desire to order the product. And so the first thing is, well, just get the product that's on the menu in. Get it in and sell it. Well, then I've got to taste it. And so that was the early stages. But those early stages lasted 4.5 years. Meaning 4.5 years.
Get it back to where it was the 2 years prior.
That's it. I didn't take a day off.
And you lived in the back.
And I lived above it. So I lived above it. I walked downstairs every day. 4.5 years, no days off.
So you said you were contractually obligated to be at LSU. Did you just quit at that point? You're like, I'm done, I'm out.
No.
What did you do?
I honored my commitment to the LSU track and field program.
For 2 more years?
No. So that was at the end. That was right when I graduated college in 2002. So that only lasted maybe 6 weeks.
Okay.
So I was contractually obligated to stay there through the middle of June of 2002.
Got it. So it wasn't like 2 more years you had to stay
right.
on board. Okay.
So maybe it was less than 6 weeks. I think I took over the spot maybe middle of May 2002, and I couldn't get back to the restaurant until like the middle of June 2002. In part because we were hosting the outdoor national track and field championships in Baton Rouge, where we won. So it was great to be there and win at home. The men won outdoors. I got another incredible ring because of that. The women had won indoors that year. The men won outdoors. So yeah, I managed the business from afar, but they had a management team in place. The management team wasn't doing a great job because the management team didn't have any leadership.
Yeah.
And
they didn't have to.
Right. They held themselves to their own standards.
So were you able to keep those people, or did you have to rehire and bring new people in with fresh blood?
Started by keeping who was there and giving everyone an opportunity. But that didn't last long. So I mean, there were just salaries that I couldn't afford to pay. You're losing $1,000 a day in the trailing 12. That means I'm the manager. I didn't have a choice. I had to let go of the management because I had an inability to pay the management salaries. So I think I kept one kitchen manager. That kitchen manager ultimately stayed with me 18 years. He went on to do something different, but he stayed with me 18 years. And that's how I had to manage it in the beginning. There wasn't the cash flow that was needed. In addition to 40% of the building, this is a big building in Galveston's beachfront. It's probably, I don't know, it's expanded. I've expanded it so many times over the years. I don't know how big it is now. Maybe it's 20,000 feet. I don't know. But 50% of that building was unoccupied.
That's when there was a bar you put in there.
That's right.
What was that bar called?
So that is Tiki Bar.
It was before that though.
That was the first one. So we did before that. There was an empty building.
It was when I first met Sean, because I went there with Amanda Langford, and it was O'Bally now, or Miranda now, but it was it was the first time they had like a fancy bar, like a Houston style bar.
Oh yeah, so that was 2009. So here.
Yes, that sounds about right.
So here's what that looks like. So 2002, we take over the restaurant with a lease with an option to buy. 2005, we open our first little ice house called Tiki Bar. 2009, we open a nightclub called Drip.
That's it.
Drip. 2010, we do Squeeze Bar. 2011, we do Rum Shack. And it's important that two things happened there. We opened 3 businesses in 3 years, and those 3 businesses were incredibly profitable. However, we grew too fast in too short of amount of time. We didn't hire adequate management. And even though these are 4, in this case 3, those 3 are bolted onto the same property, the door to door is probably 50 feet. But I was not in that restaurant. I was now in these bars. And that restaurant needed me, and they didn't have me. In that bar operation, I hired management, but it wasn't the right management. And the whole thing was incredibly profitable, but incredibly mismanaged. And so we had to take a step back. We had to let go of the entire management team at the bar operations, in part because they did something very silly. So I had taken one of my first vacations, and when I came back, I found out that they had all partied in the bar until like 6 o'clock in the morning. All the management, all the staff. So I had to let them all go.
Adult babysitting, yeah.
Right. I had to let them all go. It is very difficult because a couple of them are very dear friends of mine. Lesson to be learned there is as best you can, do not hire friends and do not hire family. I do not hire friends. I do not hire family. That was a very difficult termination. It hurt a few relationships for a duration of time. All those relationships are fine now.
I think everyone's been I've been through that. In initially, you really want to help people. And I think the biggest problem is that you'll overlook a lot of stuff that you would not normally overlook, and you won't be as hard as you normally would be to run your business. You'll kind of go, well, I'll keep a little bit in friendship or family. And so I made that mistake. I know how tough it is also to make those decisions. It's really hard. And so I think everybody does that owns a business at some point.
I've had a close friend recently ask for a job for something, and I just told her, I was like, trust me, you do not want to work for me. Not
We're
even
close
for
friends
a summer.
now, but we won't be close
I care
friends
about our
after.
friendship. Yeah, too much I can't do it. So yeah, we've both been there, and him with family too. It's just too hard.
So go back a little bit. Whenever you first took over the spot, how did you know, like, cost of goods? How did you know? Was that from work? Did you learn all that when you were first the busboy, then the cook, or however you moved up along the chain? Did you figure it out then, or did you just figure it out when you took over the restaurant?
I figured it out when I took over. So math has always been my favorite subject. My children, my wife, my team will always hear me tell them that numbers never lie. I make objective decisions, not subjective decisions. I love data. I love history. And so, how did we know what was right or wrong? I began with, at the restaurant, food cost analysis, and then getting on the internet.
What margin are you supposed to run at? So I've been in pretty much every business now at this point in my life, but never a restaurant.
The hardest.
Yeah. Well, I've also I know nothing about it. I never worked in a restaurant. And so it's always fascinating to me because we go out to eat every night, but what are they?
Some of these restaurants that they're building now are like $5 and $7 million projects.
Like, how do they get their payback? And even if they're open every night, I mean, it's like a 7-year payback. Yeah.
I don't know. So what's the profit margin?
Yeah. Or no, what's the like cost of goods? Like, what are you supposed to run at? Just in general?
Yeah, and in general, yeah, great.
To cover your costs and make sure you can pay your staff and still make a profit to keep the restaurant open.
Great question. So generally speaking, in the restaurant, your 2 largest costs are your cost of goods and your labor. and you want those to not exceed 60 to 65% of your overall expenses. And if you can manage those two, then you can make everything else fall in line. Volume solves all of those problems, right? So you get your volume up, you get your expense ratios down, things start to work. Now, the other side of that coin is you can get your volume up, and that then begins to hide problems, right? COVID was a good example of that, right? We thought we were a lean company until revenue dropped off 95%. We're like, we're pretty fat. So the short answer to that, Sean, is that I love data. I love numbers. I love learning. So I spent tremendous amount of time researching on the internet. I read every trade publication that you could ever imagine to get an understanding of the business. And
but this is still 2003-ish, 4-ish at this time. So there wasn't as much out there back then as there is now. When you're online, were you searching other food vendors to see where you could bring down your cost? Or, I mean, there's not a ton of options in the food industry.
Listen, back then, you're right, Gentry. Back then, restaurants didn't put their menus on the internet. So I would have to go to a restaurant and steal a physical menu.
Yeah, to see if you were even in line with what other people were doing.
That's right. I mean, I needed to know what someone is charging for a beer, what someone is charging for wings, both in my market and surrounding markets. And so, gosh,
I remember him coming to Houston a couple of times, and some friends of mine, and we'd all meet him, and he would be going to check out the restaurant. He's like, I'll meet you up there. I'm gonna go check out the restaurant. And he's tasting everything, and we're ordering stuff, and he's just checking the menu. And
well, I think Galveston back then, price did matter. I think we're in a different situation with Galveston now. People are more freely spending. A lot more money's in Galveston than where you were 15, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. But when price mattered, when those locals, they know the difference, and the locals are the ones that probably keep your business, going during the slow seasons too. But your first thought is, okay, now I'm negative $1,000 a day. Let's look at food cost first. Were you able to bring down your food cost? Was that the thing that helped you the most right out of the gate? And what did you end up doing next?
Yeah, so that started it, right? So I did a menu analysis on every menu item. But you got to keep in mind at the time, there's a reason why a restaurant's losing $1,000 a day in a trailing 12. It's because it's poorly operated, it's poorly managed, it's a poor physical plant. So you can't just go in and say, well, it's the wrong price, raise the price. Because the consumer's not coming in the door.
They've already had a bad experience. They've already told their friend. And so it's
not what it used to be. Yeah,
that's right. It's hot. The air conditioners don't work. The landscaping looks like crap.
They don't have shrimp kisses anymore.
The parking lot's dirty. Yeah, the food isn't good, right? So to get through all, I'll never forget. One night I went to a little bar in Galveston, and I had told someone, I don't remember who it was, that I bought the spot, and it was a girl, and she looked at me and said, "Why?" With like disgust on her face, right? But listen, I think we all as entrepreneurs spend our lives being told no. And that's what drives me. If I were to tell you that I'm going to do something and you agree with me, well, then I don't really have a desire to do it.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
But that's also the byproduct of success. And you've got to be careful with that, because the more success you have, the more yeses you get. And you've got to keep yourself in check, right? I could go out and raise a lot of money, do a lot of things right now because we've had a decent level of success, but we've got to be mindful that, well, wait a minute, can we really execute on that business plan? Or are people looking at us today and basing their decision on what we've done in the past? I often tell people that an overnight success actually takes 10 years. Mm-hmm. Nobody gives a shit what you're doing for a decade. I mean, that's it.
They say I was always told 5 years before you even see a dollar.
Yeah.
I didn't pay myself a paycheck for 3.5 years. So I do know what that looks like, and I didn't believe it. And I think people have false hope because they're on the internet and they see people who are successful on the internet. And just like you say, so many businesses, I'm like, how has that business been around for 15 years? I've never even heard of them until yesterday. Because it takes that long to get established, to get the ball rolling, and get everything kind of squared away.
Well, the first loan that I needed, so I executed.
That was my next question. Is when did you have to start borrowing money?
Well, yeah. So we've got this 3-year window, and I don't know if there were any extensions on that lease. Again, I didn't know what I was doing. Okay, I Googled.
Oh, so you were leasing for 3 years with the option to buy at the end of the 3 years.
Correct.
Okay, and let's go back a little bit further too. So your first month you lose $30,000. Did you pull yourself out of that by month 2 or 3 at all, or was it you were still running negative for a long time? And how did you sustain that?
No, great question. So we took it to break even in 12 months.
Okay.
So we went from negative 365 in the trailing 12 to break even in the first 12. And then we continued to reinvest every dollar back into the property for the first 7, 8, or 9 years. I mean, I lived like these tech guys call it ramen profitability, right? I'm making enough money to buy ramen noodles. And so in my case, I lived above the restaurants. I had no living expenses. And I had a 1996 Chevrolet pickup truck. And
So you weren't paying yourself. You were eating at the restaurant, not paying yourself.
Absolutely not. I ate at the restaurant. I didn't own kitchenware until my first child was born. I ate out every day for a decade.
And I think this is so interesting to learn, because I feel like so many people give up too easy because they don't see that it's working in the first 30, 60, 90 days. You went for an entire year or longer with no paycheck, wearing the same freaking clothes every day, living on a mattress upstairs with no dishware and a 32 by 32 shower. That's pretty amazing. Most people wouldn't have lasted 12 months.
Yeah, we did that for a long time. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, funerals. And I look back, at least in one funeral, for example, that I missed. That is a regret that I missed that particular funeral. It was the mother of one of my friends, and I prioritized work over attending that funeral. I didn't do it deliberately, but that's just where I was.
You just knew it was going to set you back by leaving the office for days. It's going to put 2 days worth of work for you on the second day.
I just didn't have anybody.
I get it. I've been in the same exact position. My family never understood. My dad, who's no longer with us, would always yell at me. He's like, "You never come down here. You're never part of anyone's birthday. You're never part of this or that." And I'm like, well, first of all, none of you bitches drive up to Houston. None of y'all hoes. And I don't have time. It's not even just the hour that I would spend there. It's the hour and a half in traffic. It's the hour and a half coming back. I don't have a half a day to give. I don't, because I knew my business would suffer without me being there. So I totally understand. And, get
a lot of sacrifices.
A lot of sacrifices.
Any entrepreneur that's as successful is going to tell you the same thing.
Yeah. Shaw was living in his flip houses, doing sheetrock and plumbing and going to sleep.
But the same thing, I was so young that I'm like, I can live off like $30 a week. I was like, I can wear the same jeans every day. I was like, I don't really care. I was like, what happens if I lose my money?
Your puka shell necklaces. I'm sure you probably had one too. So what did you do in the first 12 months? Because obviously you're running a negative. Did you have to get a loan at that point? Who even gave you a loan? How did you get a loan when your business is not profitable?
Yeah, so great question. And initially the answer is nobody believed in me except me. So I only
not even that lady at the bar.
No, I only had $10,000. I spent roughly $9,000 on the first month's rent. I had $1,000 worth of working capital, and I worked my ass off immediately to reduce expenses, whatever that meant. I had to let salaried people go because I couldn't afford them. There was at least one day that I remember distinctively that there were only 2 people working in that restaurant, me and the kitchen manager that I kept. I remember that. So
you're the food runner, you're the server,
name it, everything, right? So to answer your question, we worked really, really hard to cut expenses, which got us to break even. My father says that was May of 2002. January 2003 comes along. I've got to pay property taxes. There's $7,000. I don't have the money. I went to my father, who is. My mother and father are wonderful people. They're not entrepreneurs. My mother is still a 5th grade teacher, 40 plus years. My father had 2 jobs. He drove a forklift as a union worker for Lipton Iced Tea Company for 20 years. And then he worked for the county of Galveston for 20 years. So these are just really wonderful people who work really, really hard.
But not big risk takers.
But not big risk takers. I'm parking money in my 401k, my IRA, and that's what I'm going to do. So my father loaned me $7,000 to pay those property taxes. So very similar to the first $20,000 loan that Diane Dusich gave me. I was able to pay her back within 6 months. I was able to pay my father back that $7,000.
But at least your father could see that you were like getting out of the hole. Every month was getting a little bit better. That you were going in the right direction. That he felt like he trusted you with this.
I think my dad has always believed in me. Like he doesn't need to know the details, but he believes in me. And so yeah, we paid him back. So those were the first 2 loans that we took. Diane Dusich, $20,000, paid her back within 7 months. My father, $7,000, paid him back within 6 months. And so the next thing that happens, this is very interesting. So I get a call from Marion Dusich, and he said, "Listen, I'm currently negotiating with a lender. And the way for me to gain leverage is to not pay the lender." you're writing me a check every month for $9,000
on your building.
And so he's not making any money. He'll make money at the sale, but he's not making money daily, right? Or monthly, right? So I'm paying him a mortgage payment. He's just sending my check to the lender. So he calls me as a gentleman. He says, I need to negotiate. The only way I can negotiate is with leverage. And so to leverage it, I'm going to stop paying them. So here's what I want you to do, Dennis. Stop paying me. Put the money aside, but don't send me the check because I'm not going to send them the check.
Sounds like some COVID times here.
Well,
some of that kind of stuff happened in COVID. They're writing it off or adding it to the end of the loan. I would love to know what caused them to do that. If you can talk about that, like what would the bank? And what kind of situation are you in?
Yeah. So at the time, Marion had about $4.5 million worth of loans out across a number of different properties. The interest rate at the time was 9.95%, and it had a significant prepayment penalty. And so he was saying, I want to pay you off. And they're saying...
Trying to get around the prepayment.
Correct.
Yeah,
trying to get around the prepayment penalty.
Most commercial like that, though, isn't it?
No, I've gotten one situation like that, and it was more due to the interest rate. So you can take a lower interest rate up front in return for having some type... If the interest rates adjust, then you're going to have to cover the difference. And so, I mean, I'm sure back then there was probably different scenarios.
And a prepayment penalty, for those listening that doesn't know what does that look like? If I pay off my building, after year 5 on a 20-year note, is it just a percent of the interest they would have made on the entire deal? Is it 10%, 50%? What does that look like?
Yeah,
are we talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Yeah, so every deal is different, but effectively what the lender is saying is I'm giving you money, and I'm looking forward.
A return. They want a return on
that. That's
right.
right. I'm looking forward to a return on my investment.
Yeah.
Because I have shareholders or owners.
Exactly, to answer to.
And so we need to protect our ability to have that return on investment. So if you want to pay your loan off early, it's going to cost you a portion of what you would have paid us, what we forecasted in our forward.
What does that look like? What kind of percent is a prepayment?
It really depends on the deal with the bank. And there's not, I don't think they're around as much
5%?
anymore. I don't have any commercial deals like that.
I'm just super curious. I'm going to have to look that up, what that looks like, because I really don't have any idea.
Mine, at the time when I did it, it was a difference in interest rate. So the interest rate had moved like 1.5 or something.
Oh, okay.
And so I think I owed $150,000 on a...
That's still a pretty big chunk.
Yeah. I mean, on a $1.6 million building, it's a lot of money.
I looked at a deal last week. And not our deal. We also operate in the private debt and private equity arenas, but we had a deal come across our desk from a what we would consider a participating bank, and they had a prepayment penalty. And what that said was there was a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, meaning if you pay me off in year 1, you owe me the remaining 4 years worth of interest. And so that's what it would look like. Pay me off in year 3, you owe me the remaining 2 years left of interest that you would otherwise pay me.
So it's good for someone who's investing in their very first commercial project, what that looks like, and to look into that, look at the different interest rates options that you have in a prepayment.
But like Sean said, not super common.
They don't do it as much anymore.
Okay.
On a typical commercial loan, it's not as common. You can refinance most of the time at any time. Where the only one that I do have outstanding now is a seller finance deal. And she just wanted to make sure that because she was selling us a property for cheap, she just wanted to make sure she got a guaranteed return over, the next 10 years or whatever it was. And so we had a prepayment penalty, but had such a low interest rate in return for that prepayment penalty. So it was still a good deal. Now a really good deal because interest rates are 9% and ours is 3%.
Yeah, I've considered paying this one off so many times that I'm pretty sure I had that penalty. And I can't because I only have a 2% or something crazy.
Yeah, it's like it's like an SBA 30-year. I was like, don't pay it off. It's like,
right.
You can't go make 2% on your money anywhere.
Right.
I was like, the banks are paying you 5.5%. You can, you can just
on
keep your money in the bank. Yeah.
So you get this option to not pay rent for how long? How long did that go for?
Yeah, so very interesting, right? So he's negotiating with the lender, and I am incredibly concerned. I don't know. 2 years
if he's going to
business.
foreclose on.
Well, I'm 2 years into my business, and I'm now trying to grow a business, and I'm doing a really great job, and I'm working really hard, and I don't want to lose it.
Back of your mind, you're like, I might lose this thing.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I found out who the lending institution was and who the loan officer was, and I called him directly, and I said, I understand what's going on, but I want you to understand that I'm operating this business.
I'm not losing it, by golly.
So what I told him is, you've got a $4.5 million outstanding loan with this gentleman, and if he doesn't pay you, you're going to be fired. So I'm offering you an opportunity to potentially not lose your job. And what I need from you is I need you to tell me what the loan balance is and how the hell could I go and get a loan so you don't lose your job. And so he first hung up on me, right? Because it's probably illegal. And then after a few days went by, he realized that he had a problem. And he called me and he said, it's a $967,000 outstanding balance, which this is also interesting. So I paid $1.35 million for that property. And it was only because Marion had an appraisal that was a few years old. And he said, I don't know what it's worth. Look at the appraisal. That's what you're going to pay. I was like, okay,
what was your taxes on it at this point?
Well,
was it $4 million?
7,000. No,
Well, I know your taxes
Oh,
were almost non-existent. So at 7,000, what is that? Like you're appraising your building at
yeah,
400,000?
Maybe, yeah, something like that.
Freaking
Yeah.
great. I hope you still have it there and that nobody from whatever your GCAD is listening.
Yeah, and so anyway, he tells me it's $967,000. And then he actually connects me with another lender and he says, hey, this is the date and this is the time in which it's going to go to foreclosure. And so then you're going to call this guy and he's going to make it happen for you, right? I said, okay, I'll figure it out. Well, I get a call. So I know the date, I know the time that this is all supposed to happen.
Like I'm sweating for you. I'm trying to think like you're already
especially when
probably
you're
not
young
sleeping.
and you don't understand a lot about lending. I'm sure it's like, I mean, my first deal I'd have been like, what?
I knew nothing.
But I'm surprised Marion and Susan or whatever, Diane, I'm sure they at this point, they're trying to they're trying to cash out so they can invest more in Croatia.
Right.
So that's why they're fighting with them. But I can't believe they were going to let something go all the way to foreclosure or just scaring the shit out of the guy into the very last minute and playing a game of chicken. Who knows?
And so that's what happened. It's exactly what happened. So I get a call at like 5:05 on the foreclosure date from the gentleman who was the lender. And I'm thinking he's about to call me and tell me, okay,
That's
great.
it. Door's
And so
locked.
I'm thinking, hey man, I just bought this piece of property for $967,000 instead of $1.35 million. I just made a great deal. I saved $400,000. And he calls me and he says, it didn't go to foreclosure. Someone came in and paid off the $4.5 million worth of outstanding debt. You have a new lender. I get a call later from a gentleman named Lou Hayden. Lou Hayden founded San Antonio Shoe Company. And he was an incredible friend of Marion Dusich's who's done many, many, many deals together. Well, he bought the notes and he said, I'm now your lender.
That was a curveball I wasn't expecting. You neither at the time.
So he comes down to Galveston and he sits down at a table with me and he says, you're, 3, 4, 5 months behind on your rent. And I said, no, sir, I'm not. Give me just a moment. I walk upstairs. Every month I had taken that 8825.49 check and I cashed it at the bank and I put it in an envelope and I put it in a shoebox and I walked downstairs and I handed him a shoebox.
You just knew you were saving it just in case.
I'm honest.
Yeah.
Marion Dusich is honest. And so he opens the shoebox. He says, what is this? That's the money I owe you. He closes. He says, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? I don't know how much money it was,
$40,000.
$50,000 in cash. And he says, go deposit this money and send me a check. And so anyway, that's how my relationship started with Lou Hayden, and Lou was single-handedly responsible for our growth on that corner of 32nd to 33rd and Seawall. He was a tremendous, tremendous gentleman who always believed in me. He loaned us all the money to buy all the adjacent properties over the years.
So he followed through with the same agreement you had with Marion.
He did.
He didn't have to. Was it a handshake deal or was it in writing?
It was a handshake deal.
Well, that's really
It was a
awesome of
handshake
him
deal.
to
Yeah, it wasn't all great, right? It was, it was contentious at times, but I mean, he walked in and he said, "Listen, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll take every payment that you ever made to Marion Dusich, and I'll cut it in half, meaning half of it's going to go to interest and half of it's going to go to principal," which is a great deal. Now, he wasn't always happy. I remember on one time he called me and I don't remember what our disagreement was. But he said, remember the deal that I made you?
Don't ever forget it.
Half and half? It's off the table. Forget it. Well, we had been months into the deal. And I said, you know what, Lou? Come get the keys. I wasn't telling the truth. So I had inherited a bookkeeper that worked for Marion Dusich for like 30 years. So Lou Hayden knew her. And I go back to the back and I say, hey, Ruth, your phone's going to ring. And it's going to be Lou Hayden. And you tell Lou that I left the keys on the table and I walked out the back door.
Oh, shit.
And Ruth looks at me and she says, absolutely not. I said, damn it, do what I said. I got to go back out there and cook hamburgers. And so she did that. And Lou, I finally answered the phone later that day and said, Lou, of course I didn't leave. And he says, okay, deal's back on. But ultimately, shortly thereafter, he says, look, you need to go get me taken out with traditional financing. You need to go to a bank. I need out of this deal.
How many years was that into at this point? Are we four-ish years into
probably
it now?
Probably year 3 or 4, okay. Something like that. No, you know what? It was year 2.5. It was year 2.5. Because I remember going to a local bank, and I'll be a gentleman, and I won't throw them under the bus, but I went to a local bank in Galveston, and I asked
I can already guess which one.
I asked the gentleman for a $1 million loan, because that's what Lou said. Hey, you get me $1 million, maybe you owe me $1 million too, whatever. I'll hold the paper on the $200,000, but somebody needs to write me a check for $1 million. So I walked into the bank. This is a bank where I started a banking relationship with at the age of 11, with a passbook savings account. Meaning I would pass the book in some money, and the teller would put her initials or his initials, and they'd give it back, and I'd put my initials, and I would then go home, and my money had been deposited safely in the bank. This is a relationship that I began at the age of 11. So naturally, that was a relationship that I started my business with. So we're 2.5 years into the business. It's not doing very well, but it's not losing any money. And I asked for $1 million, and he tells me that he'll give me $800,000. And I am just ecstatic. I'm like, wow. Now, of course, I had to present financials and have a conversation, right? He just didn't say, hey, I'm giving you $800,000. But I walk out and I call Lou Hayden and I said, Lou, I got great news. And he says, what?
Uh-oh, not enough.
I said, well, the bank's going to give me $800,000. He said, well, how much do you owe me? $1 million. Well, do you have $200,000?
They loan 80% of value.
Yeah. I said, no, I don't have $200,000. Well, where are you? I said, I'm in the parking lot of the bank. He says, great. Go back into the bank, go walk into that lender's office, look him right in his eyes, tell him to go fuck himself. Absolutely not. In hindsight, I understand what he was saying. He was saying that he knew that bank had banked me since I was 11. They should have believed in me. That's what he was saying, but that was his way of saying it. Shortly thereafter, I went to a different bank, who I will tell their name. I went to Moody National Bank.
First one I assumed. And I was like, oh, look where you are now, which we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, you go to Moody Bank. Okay.
I went to Moody National Bank.
And you meet Mike?
And I sat in the bank president's office, Vic Pearson, and he offers me a seat at a couch in front of his desk. He offers me a glass of water, and we talk for about 30 minutes. He asks me about my business. I had brought a folder that had all my financial information in it. Had my father with me at the time, and so Vic initially was talking to my father, and my father said, Vic, I don't know anything about my son's business. I'm only here because my son asked me to be here. I have nothing to do with his business. And Vic asked me about 30 minutes worth of questions. All of the answers were in the folder. I never needed to open the folder because I know my numbers. And he looks at the loan officer next to him and he says, deposit $1 million into his account. And so I
shit your pants. Okay.
Well, so the loan officer says, well, Mr. Pearson, don't we have to go to loan committee and get this approved? And he says, open Mr. Byrd an account with $1 million in the account. And so
which doesn't usually happen.
Which doesn't happen, right?
But that was Moody Bank's grown even since then. But Moody Bank is just really big on relationships. I know this through Sean.
Mike Weisner gave me my first loan when I was probably 21, 22 for a real estate deal. And it would I probably didn't make enough money at the time. I don't know. I don't
Is
even
it how
remember.
you ended up meeting Mike was through the bank? Or?
So my deals were with Michael Lerner, and Sean has done some deals with Michael Weisner. So Michael Weisner was sort of the man.
There's so many Michaels I can't keep up.
Yeah. And so like Michael Lerner learned from Michael Weisner, and Michael Lerner has become incredible now in executing on loans there for the bank. But interestingly, I called Lou Hayden and I told him that, and he says, very good. Call him and tell him that you don't need the money. And I said, what?
You're like, I just sweated through this whole meeting this whole time, and now you're telling me I don't need it?
He says, I believed in you. I just needed somebody else to believe in you.
Oh my God, I can't.
And so
I hate this guy already. He's making me sweat.
For the next number of years, I would identify a piece of property that I would want to buy, and I would call him and I would ask, I'd sort of tell him what I needed to tell him to get him comfortable with it. And I'd ask him to borrow the money, and he would loan it to me, and it was always a fixed interest rate. It was always 5%. I built the Excel spreadsheet. He believed that the Excel spreadsheet was accurate, which it was. But at some point in time in our relationship, I called him and I said, hey, Lou, I owe you a few $1 million. And there's only two people who know that I owe you a few $1 million. It's you and I. If anything happens to me or if anything happens to you, we need...
I'll never papered it up or anything.
Never. It was just an Excel spreadsheet and a handshake. That's it.
These are like deals of the 80s.
Yeah.
That don't exist anymore.
Yeah. And so I said, look, I think we need to put some sort of legal document in place that just documents what we have going on in the event that anything happens to you or I. He says, look, if that makes you feel good, Dennis, that's fine. And so I said, okay. I call an attorney and I'm like, hey, I owe this guy this much money. These are our agreements. Put it in a piece of paper. I get on a Southwest plane. I go from Houston, land in San Antonio. I go up the escalator. He meets me at the top. I pull out the piece of paper and I said, here, let's go over this. He says, do you have a pen?
He just signs it, didn't even look at it.
He goes to the last page to sign. I said, well, Lou, don't you want to have somebody review this document? Well, Dennis, is there anything in this document that is different from what you and I talked about? I said, no, sir. He signs it. He hands it back. He says, get back on the plane and go back to work. I went right back on the plane. I got right back to work. And so Lou passed away actually on Marion Duzich's birthday, which was February of some year. I don't recall. Been more than 11 years ago. So my first son's name is Hayden Byrd, and he's named after Lou Hayden's last name because he made such an impact on my life. Because Marion and Diane believed in me, and Lou believed in me, and I'll never forget it. So on my desk in my office, I have lots of pictures of my family, and I've got a picture of Lou. And so whenever I make a decision, I always think about the conversations that I would have had with him in order to get confident in my ability to execute. And interestingly, one thing Lou never did was he never told me he was proud of me or patted me on the back or great job, which was fine. But I always came back to work thinking, damn, I need to work harder. So this guy
He's never good enough.
Can tell me I'm doing a good job. When he passed away, his daughter called me and says, I'd like you to be an honorary pallbearer at his funeral. And so I went to the funeral in Pleasanton, Texas, right outside of San Antonio. I was probably the youngest person there by 30 years. And what was interesting to me is that I arrived and everyone knew who I was. Everyone knew the restaurant. Everyone knew my
How proud
annual
of
revenue.
him. Yep. Everybody who's so proud of you, but he never wanted to tell you.
He told everybody everything that I did the moment that I left. So, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. For me, it was good. It made me work harder. It made me always strive to try to get that attaboy from him, which I never got. But yeah, but it's fine.
Gave it to you with all the deals he did with you.
Well, yeah, he gave it to me in believing in me.
Yeah.
Right, in believing in me. And he always believed in me. And he didn't make it easy. I couldn't pick up the phone and say, hey, I need $500,000. And he says, okay, I'm going to send it to you tomorrow. No. Get on a plane, come here, explain to me like a 2-year-old what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, why is it going to work. And there was always push and pull. But it made me evaluate every deal objectively to ensure that I was getting the right deal. The one property that I tried to buy first, so if you go to the spot in Galveston, there's a little bitty yellow house in the parking lot behind us.
I just remember a convenience store next door.
Which we bought.
Okay,
with
I
Lou's
remember Sean telling me.
Lou owed me the money. We bought that gas station, tore it down, and
So I don't remember the yellow house. The parking lot? Is it where your parking lot is
So it's
now,
still
or?
there. So I get a phone call. I'm sitting at a little Mexican restaurant in Galveston, and I get a phone call from a gentleman who owns the restaurant at the house, and he says, hey, I understand you're the guy that owns the spot, and I've got this little house behind you, and I'd like to sell it to you. So that's great. He says, $55,000.
Wow.
I said, absolutely. I didn't have $55,000, but okay. So I call Lou. This was maybe the first time I tried to do a second deal with Lou, right? First deal was he bought out the loan. Second deal. And he says, Dennis, that house isn't worth anything to anybody but you. It's not worth $55,000. I said, Lou, it is worth $55,000 and I need to buy it.
It's like a game of Monopoly. Anything that touches your property, you have to buy.
Well, so I couldn't get it. I didn't buy it because nobody would give me the money. And anyway, I've not been able to buy that house.
Does someone actually live in there?
It's correct. I've not been able to buy it. It's a vacation rental. But interestingly, the the person who owns that vacation rental has upset all of the neighbors. And so every piece of property that I've bought adjacent, I think there's maybe 9 of them now, I've never approached any property owner. They've all come to me. And more than half of them have come to me and said, I don't want to sell your neighbor this property. I want to sell you this property. So I think that what that illustrates is if we sort of in our company, we put our people first. We take care of our team, guest, and community. We lead our decision-making with compassion. Every day of the week, there's a word. And every store says that word to their respective teams every shift. So Mondays, for example, today is compassion. We lead our weeks with compassion. And I do that in every decision that I make. And so the community sees it. The neighbors see it. It's very, very difficult to get me upset about something. Business is transactional, like we talked about earlier. But we just treat people right. We treat them with dignity and respect, and we're professional, and we're just good people. And a deal's a deal. It's worth whatever it's worth. It's not worth less. It's not worth more. Sometimes people don't agree with that. But in these cases of all these properties that we bought around there, it was always, we're willing to pay you fair market value because we know what we can do with it. And we know that you ought to be paid fair market value.
And so also anyway, where it's going to go in 5, 10, 15 years in Galveston. Galveston is just expanding exponentially in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we keep doing our job, we work hard, then we'll make our properties more valuable, and we'll make the adjacent properties around us more valuable. So we're still buying properties today. I think we made our last acquisition, at least around that property, 2019. We bought another little house around there. So every time that another house comes available, we buy it. And some of them we do tear down, but some of them we don't. And we bought a cute little house and made an office out of it. So the outside of it looks like a wonderful little cute house, and on the inside it's all business. So that's.
So how did you end up with the hotel next door, down the street?
Yeah, it's interesting. So there was a gas station next to the Spot restaurant in Galveston, and this is crazy. Somehow gas stations always have ripe bananas. If you don't notice that, you'll notice it now.
I noticed that because I cannot eat a ripe banana.
So we sold banana splits at the Spot, but we never sold enough of them. And the bananas would always go bad.
So you just go next
door.
So
I would go next door to the gas station to buy a banana and come and make a banana split. And one day I walked into the gas station to buy a banana, and the cashier says, you need to talk to Sammy. Who the hell is Sammy? He says, well, Sammy owns this property, and he wants to sell it. He just needs to sell it to you because you own the property next door. It's like, yeah, give me Sammy's number. And so I get Sammy's number, and I have a conversation with him, and we make an agreement on price. He was a gentleman. He says, listen, I bought a package of 50 gas stations all across the country. This is one of them that I bought. It's an underperforming location, but I'm not going to take a loss on it. I overpaid for it, which means you're going to have to overpay for it. But I'll give you the closing document. You'll see what I paid, and you're going to pay what I paid. I'm not going to lose any money. I said, okay, fair enough. Again, you look at it and just say, I know what I can do with it. And so when I called Lou Hayden and told him what I wanted to do, and he says, it's too much. And I used a phrase that he had used on me years before. I said, Lou, it's not about what I pay for it. It's about what I can do with it. Yes, it doesn't work as a gas station. You're right. If I wanted to operate a gas station with no gas, that's what it was, a convenience store.
Yeah,
and I wanted to sell
gas pumps,
beer and cigarettes. Okay, it doesn't work. But for what I want to do with it, I want to put a hotel on it. And I own everything around it. So even if I overpay per square foot on this track of dirt, my blended cost per square foot works. And so I at that time, Moody National Bank loaned me the money to buy that piece of dirt. Lou Hayden loaned me the other portion of the money that I need, so I don't remember what it was.
Construction cost or?
Well, maybe it was a 70%, 30% loan, debt and equity. But we didn't have any money. We were reinvesting in our business. So this would have probably been 2010. So again, 8 years into the business, we're reinvesting every dollar. So we don't have any dollars. We're betting on the come. We're betting that if we put every dollar back into the business, that the money's going to come back eventually. And so, yeah, we borrowed, Michael Lerner's going to hate this, but we borrowed 70% of the money from Michael Lerner and 30% of the money from Lou Hayden.
Took the equity from somebody else.
Yeah, so we borrowed 100% of the money. So we owned 100% of it with no partners, but we borrowed 100% of the money. It worked out. Listen, I would not recommend that if you have an interest-free student loan that you then go and buy a restaurant with it. I would not recommend that if you want to buy a big tract of dirt, which at the time was the biggest deal that we had ever done, you go and borrow 100% of the money. But we took risks because we believed in our ability to execute. But we said, hey, this thing is turning into a problem. They don't sell gas. So the only thing to sell is beer and cigarettes. That's going to negatively impact a business that we're trying to grow next to it, this restaurant. And so we want to buy this and we want to put a hotel on it. Now, how we were going to do that, I have no idea, right? But we buy it. We're doing decent enough at the restaurant where it covers the carry of that property. So there's property taxes, insurance, mortgage payment. That was maybe $10,000 a month. But at that time, the restaurant could support the $120,000 a month, a year of all of those costs. And we spent, I don't remember the year, I guess the year was 2013. We spent the entire year of 2013 and all the money that we had, which was $500,000, designing a boutique hotel. So $500,000, designing a boutique hotel. We have no idea how we're going to build it. We have no idea how we're going to finance it. We have no idea how any of these things are going to happen.
And none of you guys have ever managed a hotel or ran a hotel?
No idea. No clue.
And when you say boutique hotel, it wasn't going to be franchised at first.
Correct. So this is 2013. At the tail end of 2013, I had reached out to what have now turned out to be tremendous partners, introduced by Michael Lerner. He says, hey, Dennis, you need to meet this family in Houston. They manage hotels. You don't know anything about hotels and you're trying to build one. These people have been managing hotels since 1973. You should just reach out and meet them. So American Liberty Hospitality is the name of the firm. Nick and Vicky Massett are the principals, husband and wife. They come down to my restaurant, they meet me, and they say, look, we think you're going to do something good, and we're willing to help you. We're not going to charge you anything, but any information you need about the hotel business, reach out to us. So we spent all of 2013 and all the money that we had drawn this boutique hotel. And then we get a phone call from Nick Massett. He says, hey, Dennis, 1 mile down the road, there's a hotel for sale. We think you ought to look at that hotel to buy it instead of building this one. It's already operating. It's there. We could convert it to something different, and you can lead it. And we'll join you in the equity stack if you'd like to have us. We'll manage it for you. We'll do whatever you want to do. But Galveston is your market, and you should look at this property.
I remember that. It was a Holiday Inn on the beach.
That's right. Holiday Inn Sunsbury. And that owner had gotten in an argument with Holiday Inn, so they ripped the flag of it off, and so it became an unbranded hotel. So here's 2013. I'm 33 years old, and I just took a $500,000 loss because I'm drawing these plans for a hotel that I'm now going to scrap to go buy one down the street. And so that's how we got into the hotel business. We ultimately negotiate the acquisition of that hotel in the first quarter of 2014. That hotel, we repositioned it as a DoubleTree by Hilton. At the time, I guess I had worked harder and figured out how to get some more money, but maybe it was 2012 when I lost that $500,000. I'm not sure where the years fall, but nonetheless.
We said lost the $500,000. Are you also including the cost of the land too?
No. So we still own the land.
Okay.
So we own the land, but we spent $500,000 on architects, interior designers, engineers.
To do a whole hotel, it's expensive.
Oh yeah. I mean, those costs are, it's a lot of money. So we buy this unbranded, undermanaged hotel, and we turn it into a DoubleTree by Hilton. It was our first hotel that we had ever done. Made every mistake you could make. And so it was our first time ever raising money. We'd never done that before. So we had to figure that out. I think I own 65% of that hotel. So we had to go and raise the 35% of the equity. And we did it. Again, I tell people I'm not really smart. So I said, we've got 100 units of equity that need to be sold. And we're going to sell them at $45,000 a unit. And so anyway, I put in whatever 65 units is. That's whatever, how much money I had at the time, because I wanted to be able to protect my equity stack, meaning that if I made any mistakes, I didn't want my problem to be their problem.
That's how I am too.
And so instead of taking 100% of it, I said, I'll just take 65% to make sure I got this cushion over here. And so anyway, and we made a mistake. We went 40% over budget. That was $2.4 million. I had $2.5 million saved in case shit happened. And shit happened. So I wrote a $2.4 million check to cover the cost overruns.
And now you're back to where you were in 2002.
Right. But what we did is we did not capital call our partners. We loaned that money to the asset at 0% interest. And we worked our asses off for the next 2.5 years to ramp it up and stabilize it to the point where we could then refinance it and get our money out.
Did you, whenever you bought the hotel, what portion were you renovating while it was still open? So did you just take a handful of rooms and renovate like 4 or 5 rooms? Like how did you do the renovation
And still make
and
money.
still keep it open and still keep people having a good experience? Like how do you stabilize a hotel like that?
Yeah, so it was a challenge. It was a challenge for a couple different reasons. I mean, you mentioned that it was a Holiday Inn Sun Spree hotel initially, which it was. But when we bought it, it no longer had a flag, so a branded flag on the hotel. It was just an independent hotel. So occupancy and rate are very, very low because guests...
There's no advertisement for them.
That's right.
Through the brand.
And guests don't, at least in our market, right? Guests don't feel comfortable in a hotel that doesn't have a big brand behind it. You feel safe when you're at a Hilton or a Holiday Inn or a Marriott. When it's
Joe's Hotel.
Red
the
carpet, the
Lynch
red
Hotel.
carpet in.
It's like, well, if I have a problem at the Lynch Hotel, who am I going to call? I can't get in touch with Sean Lynch, right? So to answer your question, it is actually a nice box. They're all beachfront facing rooms. There's an elevator shaft right down the middle.
That's a great property.
Yeah, it's just so we took all 5 levels, put up a piece of drywall, and we did 50% of the building at a time. And we were able to do it because there was low occupancy because it wasn't a branded hotel. So I think we bought it in February of 2014, and we didn't start renovations until the day after Labor Day. So we ran it through the summer, cleaned it up, put a little lipstick on a pig. Day after Labor Day, we start renovating rooms. We open 50% of the hotel the day before Bike Rally. So you got people that walk in.
And they go in there and just tear it all up.
Oh yeah, Lone Star Rally comes in and one guest gets a really crappy room and another guest gets a brand new room. And then the day after Lone Star Rally weekend, we close the other 50% of the hotel. So effectively, short story is, we bought it in February of 14. We opened as a DoubleTree February of 15. So it was a year. And we built in enough working capital and interest carry into the deal that we were able to get through it.
So how does that work when you're buying a new franchise? When you switch over the franchise with your new ownership, do you have to follow all their specs of how the rooms look? Are you using their contractors? Do they send people in? You have to hire your own and just follow the plans? How does that work?
Right. So they use a term that I absolutely hated until I did my first franchise deal.
I was about to say, I was like, now you get it.
Yeah.
All the things that you hated about them for creating consistency, now you're trying to do to the airport.
Yeah. So they call it brand standard. And I got so tired of the word brand standard that, there was at least one phone call where I said, why don't you just come buy the hotel? Because I'm tired of hearing your brand standard. Like, I get it. But yes, and so I mean, you have to go through all the design approvals. They have to approve it, and you've got to meet all of their metrics, right? Everything from the slip coefficient of a tile to the softness of a sheet. And you can select any contractor that you want to do it, but you've got to present it to them. They approve it, then they come back and ensure that you did exactly what you said you were going to do. Which, in hindsight, it's exactly what we did at our franchise stores in Houston Hobby.
What type of fee do they charge you? Like what type of franchise fee or to get a
Percent
hotel
of
like
sales,
that? Is it revenue or is it a one-time fee or?
Yeah, so both. I mean, they'll charge you an initial application fee, non-refundable, right? So it ranges $50,000 to $150,000 based on how many rooms, right? So if you're under a threshold, maybe it's a flat fee. If you're over a threshold, it's a per room fee. So anywhere between $50,000 and $150,000 just to apply to have the brand. And if you get denied, they don't give you your money back.
I get it. Well, they have admin costs related to getting this. So I get that.
And then operationally, throughout the hold period, you're going to pay about 9% of your top line. And that's a variation of fees.
Wow.
Technology fee, reservation fee, a bunch of fees. But it's the power of the brand drives the revenue. And I mean, there's no arguing that. Sure, you can go to South Beach in Miami and you don't need to be a Hilton hotel because everything is hip and cool in South Beach, right?
We're actually going in 2 weeks, so I'm not.
There you go. You can go to the Delano, you go to the SLS, right? I mean, they're a great hotel.
Yeah, you got to tell us where to go, because I was looking at the map trying to figure out, poking each one of them, and I was like, I'd never heard of that one. Not going there.
Yeah, but even as a family taking vacations, I mean, I stay at branded hotels. I mean, there are particular brands that I know that I'm going to get the level of service that I want when I go on vacation. So even me, I'm brand specific. Maybe there are places that I stay on work and I stay on vacation. And when I travel for work, I'm going to stay at a Hampton Inn or a Holiday Inn Express, right? It's transactional. I need to go, I need to eat, I need to sleep, I need to go to work. And then when I go on family vacations, I want to stay somewhere nicer because I need that experience. So the fee that you pay to the brand should always be offset by the revenue that they send you. So one report that I have the management company send me every month is what percentage of our reservations were derived from the brand. So I call it brand contribution. And generally that's about 60 to 65% of our reservations come from what I call brand.com.
You even knew that was going to be the case when it was Joe Schmo's hotel and you saw how many were coming in versus how quickly you were able to fill up when you branded it, correct?
Right.
So you already knew that was a thing.
What occupancy do you have to be at to break even on maybe, I don't know, what was that, 100 and something rooms? What was it?
Yeah, so the first hotel was 97 rooms. That hotel performs exceptionally well. It operates north of 80% annualized occupancy. It's incredible. The market is just incredible there. The short answer is we build 4 or 5 or 6 models, and we've dialed it in now with an Excel spreadsheet to where we can put in occupancy, dropping the occupancy, raising the occupancy, dropping the rate, raising the rate to determine the break.
Oh, I guess it does matter on the rate too, right?
Yeah. And it determines in today's dollars, right? The interest rate really matters. So our second hotel, that interest rate shifted from 4% to 8%, right? I mean, that was baked into the agreement at the termination of year 5. It moves to Wall Street Journal Prime. Well, when we got the loan, it was 4%. Well, at the completion of year 5, Wall Street Journal Prime at the time was 8%. So I mean that doubled our interest cost. That's another $600,000 per year in interest expense,
which is happening all over the country right now.
Correct.
With the commercial loans come and due, and so that's what everybody's saying is like, hey, there's a problem because every regional bank holds all the paper with most commercial loans, and that's what they're saying. There's going to be a problem that people are going to get overextended. They're not going to be able to make double the interest payment, and you're going to see a ton of foreclosures and everything else in the market, although I haven't seen any really in Houston. It's not really hit it hard at all yet. I mean, it's hard to find deals.
You're right. Deals are hard to find.
Crazy, right? All the rates that are getting that high, and nothing's still really, I mean, not significant. I mean, there's
the amount of times he thought he was going to hit the jackpot in this last 4 years, and
Yeah.
everything just keeps going up.
I thought the pandemic, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to be able to buy a bunch of stuff.
He was waiting.
Sure enough, it was like the complete opposite happened.
Because we had gone through, I mean, I first met you in 2008.
Yeah, 2008,
so
and like you kind of see something happening.
2013,
like,
2017, just kept thinking there was going to be a
this
cycle
happened
come
again,
through.
and I had actually had cash around. I'd make a ton of money, right?
Yep. He's like, I'm not going to be scared this time. I'm going to do it. I'm going to all in.
And nothing
Nothing
happened. Just like,
Well, you're exactly right. So
would have
during
never
the
thought
pandemic, we bid and lost on 24 hotels all across the country because their interest rates were so low, excess capital was so high that buyers were willing to pay cap rates, right? So overpay.
I was going to ask that too. What is the average cap rate on a hotel sell for? Like a decent hotel, decent name, like is it an 8 or 7?
Yeah,
Like, what is this?
So yeah, I think a Hilton product probably trades around an 8 cap, and a Holiday Inn product probably trades at a 9 cap. So I mean, for the listeners who don't understand what that means, right? So I mean, you just take your EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, and divide it by either 0.08, 0.09, and that sort of gives you an exit valuation. Is the way I do it. It's the easiest way to do it. But your nicer hotels, right? You get into a Four Seasons, for example. The lower the cap rate, the higher the valuation. It's like a Four Seasons is going to trade at like a 3 cap, which means that somebody's saying, well, we'll just make a 3% return on our investment because we know that there's always going to be a buyer for it. Maybe you have a better way to explain it, but
yeah, no, that's essentially what it is. I
explain
always
it-
tell
you
her,
explain it a little
and
bit
that's why
different.
there's so much money in commercial real estate because the revenue does determine the value of the building and the tenant, and hotels being the same thing, right? So somebody's willing to overpay for a brand that they know is always going to produce revenue and that they can always resell.
I have to know what happened to the building next door.
Oh,
Is it still there?
So we bought it.
Still selling bananas?
Well, we bought that property in 2010, and we developed it in 2018. We opened a 134 room Holiday Inn Express in the fourth quarter of 2019. We did a 5-story parking garage that the Spot Restaurant and the Holiday Inn share. Then 90 days later, COVID hits.
Oh, yeah.
Hotel revenue goes to zero.
Were you guys able to get some PPP loans to help float you through that?
We were able to get some PPP loans. We were able to reach out to lenders and sort of defer payments.
That's what I was doing at my buildings too.
Right.
It's still, I mean, it sounds like that's an easy thing to get out of, but your fixed costs are so high. It's not even the deferred payments. It's like your labor costs and all your fixed costs are through the roof. And so to have zero revenue is like you're losing a lot of money.
How long was it zero revenue? Months?
It was, so the hotels were much more difficult to bring back than the restaurants. So tremendous pent up demand to eat, right?
Get out of the house like as soon as they let people out.
Right. So what we saw was our revenue in our restaurant at the time, there's only one, right? Restaurant revenue went down 95%. Bar revenue went down 100% because the bars were closed. Both of these by, government orders. But what we saw with the first round of stimulus checks, you got to understand at the time, sales are down 95%. First round of stimulus checks get deposited into accounts and our sales go up 5%. Now we're still down 90%. Okay, but that's a big deal. Like we're coming in every day trying to figure out how do we get through the day? Not how do we get to tomorrow? How do we get through the next hour, right? Because every day you're coming in and having to cut expenses, and it was a very challenging time. But what we noticed when that happened is we said, wow, this is interesting. Like people received money that they didn't earn and they went and spent it.
Food.
Right. And so we were applying for PPP at the time. It had no, as Sean said, there's no guarantee that we were going to get it. But we said, what if we bet on the come here? Like, it's just the story of our life. I just bet on the come. What if we bet on the come? And the people that we have working right now, we pay them $15 an hour, regardless of what their hourly wage is. Obviously, if it's higher than 15, pay them more. But if you're under 15, pay them $15 an hour. And will they then take that $15, go back into the community and spend it and help somebody else's business do a little bit better?
I mean, these people that are making $213 plus tips. You're talking about across the board. Everyone went to hourly during this time because business was so.
Exactly. So something my wife said recently that I thought was very interesting. She said something about community over competition. I didn't say that back then. I just heard that last week. But that's what we did. It was community over competition. But we called it people over profit. And so we said, if we're going to pay everybody $15 an hour, we're going to bet on the come. That PPP money should come. If it doesn't come, we got a bigger problem. We already have a big problem. Sales are off 95% here. The hotels are down 100%. How much bigger can the problem become? Like, we already don't have any money. So, we'll figure it out. So anyway, we paid them $15 an hour. We had, those that had been with us more than a decade, we paid them $20 an hour. Those that were older, elderly, immunocompromised, we paid them $20 an hour and guaranteed them 40 hours a week to stay home. So we spent money on our team. We called it a people over profit campaign. We began to pay it. My controller at the time told me I was, in a nice way, she told me I was crazy. She didn't quite say it that way. It was more colorful because she said, you don't have the money. You're making a commitment based on an expectation of an outcome. And you don't know that outcome is going to happen. And you made this commitment.
I thought there was no way it was going to be real. So they're going to come back and ask for it. They're going to want that money back next year.
Yeah. But we did that. We ultimately, over a 6-week period, paid our team $665,000 over 6 weeks. And it's been 4 years since the pandemic. And that act of kindness, that people over profit campaign continues to pay dividends. Because the people, this is something that we had already done. We have been doing this for years, taking care of our people, taking care of our team, guest, and community, leading with compassion. We just never talked about it. There's a reason why we have people that have worked for us for 20 years. They enjoy the environment. We don't talk about it. It's just, it's in our DNA. It's what we do. when the pandemic happened, I was like, well, maybe we need to talk about this. Maybe we need to tell people what we do, because I believe that when I go to spend my money, I like to spend my money at a place that does more than just serves me food and beverage. And so I think that's our competitive advantage is, yeah, the world got to learn about it, and we were on all the national news broadcasts in 2020 about our People Over Profit campaign. But the team, they were like, oh yeah, this is Dennis. This is who he is. Like, he does this. And so it was good for us because the world got to see what we do and why we operate, how we operate. And I tell my executive team that what sets us apart from the competition is that we do more than sell food and drinks. We do more than make hotel beds. We genuinely take care of our team, guests, and community. We put our people first. We lead with compassion. We're profitable, but we're never going to put our capital ahead of our people. Meaning if we have the money to grow, if we don't have the people to grow with us, then we pause growth. And that's happened throughout the life cycle of our business. We've paused growth in 2011 or 2012 after we opened the foursome of bars there in Galveston, because we wanted to know, do we make any money? Like, we know we spend money. So this is before we had any hotels, before we had League City, before we had Houston. We were like, well, I guess we make money because we open businesses and we don't really borrow a whole lot of money to open those businesses. Let's not do anything for 12 months. We'll reinvest in the property where things break, but let's see if we can make any money. So that was like 2011. I was like, oh, wow, we make money. That's cool. Like, I didn't know we made any money. And that's how we were able to say, okay, now we think we can figure out how to build a hotel. We can spend some money on drawing this stuff, because this business that we have, when we don't spend money on improving it, it actually spins off a decent amount of cash.
So from rewind back 10 years ago, spending 7 days a week inside of the restaurant, how do you divide your time between the hotel business? Are you there at the spot on a weekly basis anymore? Do you just have someone fully managing and running the hotels, to where you just go in for a meeting once a week or once a month? How do you divide up your time?
Yeah, so every business goes through growing pains, and those growing pains are always different. And so when I did the first hotel 10 years ago, one of the things that I did is I said, I don't want a key to a restaurant or an alarm code or a safe code.
That's Sean.
I
actually don't even know the shutter code to get into this building anymore.
Yes.
I have no clue what it is, because I don't want to be the one they call anymore.
Right. And you have to do that. And back then I was working in the business, and now I'm working on the business. And that's a big change, right? When you stop working in your business, in my case at the time, I'm literally flipping a hamburger. That's my job. Well, I can't work on my business if I'm working in the business. So once I was able to do the first hotel and I gave up those responsibilities, it helped me hold people more accountable. So what does a week look like now? So we get daily reports from all 6 properties. We do weekly
daily closeout reports.
Yep.
Does everyone hear that around here? Daily closeout reports. That's how you run your business and you manage your people. Thank you for that.
There you go. So we get daily closeout reports, as you illustrate, and
that's the best way to communicate, so you're not bombarded all day long by your people, that you can get a summary of the entire day, read your 4 summaries from your 4 businesses, filter through, respond, tell them how to handle things, answer questions, and be able to be up here looking down and managing everything and not be in it every single day. I love that. I'm just hitting it home here. With the team listening.
Well, weekly executive meetings that we do. Every Tuesday we meet from 10 to 11:30, and we just go over. I have my controller, my VP of Ops and Development, my VP of People and Culture, and then sometimes they'll loop in our culinary director, and they'll just tell me what's going on in each of their respective departments. And we're learning right now how to grow a bigger business, right? So every week we're rolling out. It's like in 2024 we're doing a digital push, and so we're working on anything that we do with pen and paper. How do you get rid of it? And so we've rolled out probably a half a dozen different digital platforms right now, and really figuring out how all that stuff works, including a new accounting platform. And so we're going through those growing pains right now, and it's a challenge leading a company and hiring really great people who execute at a high level, and in most cases do a better job than me. I then have to ask myself, now what is my responsibility? So I was doing, we hired.
There's that gap of time where you're like, do you need me? And you want to do the things and you're trying not to do those things over the things that they're doing. That's really, really hard. I had to let that go last year. And now my COO comes to me. I'm like, I don't know. You figure it out. Do it yourself. Do it however you know how I would handle it. You do it as if, it's me making the decision. Go for it.
Yeah.
And then you let go.
Well, just this past Saturday, we did a catered event, 325 people off-site for a major energy company. It is something I would have never said yes to because of an inability to execute. I hired a culinary director. I hired a VP of Ops and Development. I took a person that was doing both of those jobs, promoted her to VP of People and Culture so she can be focused on what she's great at. And my culinary director, my VP of Ops and Development said, yep, we can do it. I get a CEO, I get an email from the CEO of the company. This is a multi-billion-dollar company. I got an email from the CEO of the company who tells me he was at the event and it absolutely blew him away, has never done a company event that was executed at that high level. And I was at Disney World with my children. I mean, if I would have been there, Gentry, I would have screwed it up.
Yeah, because you would have been so high energy. Level 15.
I would have been in everybody's way. I would have made all the wrong decisions. And so it's really great to see that now the next level of working on your business, and in our case, is growing out your leadership team, allowing them to execute. And ultimately, and I tell people that my opinion, my company's not big enough for me to call myself a CEO. There's so many people that want to call themselves a CEO of a company. I just think it's kind of silly. I'm not big on titles, but I say that I'm the president of my company. I'm not the CEO because I don't have a COO. I don't have a CFO. Right? I've got vice presidents, so I'm the president. And at some point, I will replace me. I will become a CEO. I will hire a president to run the restaurant division of my company. We're looking at hotel acquisitions now. And ultimately, I will hire a president of that division. And that's the growing pains that you go through. And
well, someone that you have to that's able to have time to research and really take a better look at things when you're spread so thin with 14 different businesses, I did see an announcement, speaking of board of directors and C-suites. I saw an announcement pretty recently that you are now on the board of one of these banks that we spoke about recently. So tell us about that and how that landed in your lap.
Yeah, that's super humbling, right? So Moody National Bank is the first bank who believed in me 2.5 years into my restaurant career.
Wired that $1 million in and $1 million right back
out. That's right. Wired $1 million in, wired $1 million out. And, here we are, 20 years later, and Moody National Bank reached out to me and asked me to be a board member. I'm incredibly humbled. I'm taken aback by it. I love learning. I love numbers. And so it's fascinating to me to sit in these board meetings and hear about, what that board talks about, because I'm a customer of the bank as well, right?
You always wonder what they were saying about you.
That's correct. I was like, wow.
And they're behind closed doors. Now you know.
Right. And so, that's been an incredibly humbling experience. I'm surrounded by 9 other incredibly talented and successful men and women, and I'm able to learn from them. I'm able to learn how a bank operates. And, right now it's a function of, in my opinion, shutting up and listening, learning. And then I think after the 3rd or 4th meeting, I'll begin to talk a little bit. And I think that I'll be able to add value. And I'm just incredibly humbled. And, how did it happen? I think it's the harder you work, the luckier you get. I mean, that's a story of my career. I'm not incredibly smart. It's a series of accidents. But I used to tell people early on in my career, maybe I don't do this anymore because I've got 3 young children at home, but I used to tell people, you can't beat me because I'll outwork you. It's early in my career, it was that simple.
That's what I thought whenever I was 20. I was like, there's nobody that's working harder than me right now. Like, nobody is doing as much as I'm doing right now in my 20s. That's what I always thought in the back of my mind.
That's right.
And if you do that, a lot of stuff doesn't work out, but you're working so hard and you're making so many mistakes and you're learning so fast. Stuff does work. Some of it does work out. And so it is, I think that's true to anybody that has that success, is it does take that long. It's not an overnight success. It's a decade or so. Yeah. But hard work does pay off for sure.
Yeah. And look, I still think we're a small we're gonna grow. I mean, we'll get 6 properties, maybe 400 team members now. But I look at I look at what we're doing, and if my children ever have an interest to join my business, I've got a mental note of where I believe the business should be if they ever considered joining us.
Are any of them expressing any interest in like on the business side, or are they still too young, or what do you think?
Yeah, what's your oldest, like 10, 12?
Yeah, so I've got 11, 10, my 10-year-old is 10 today. Today's his birthday. So today's his birthday. Yeah, so I've got 11, 10, and my baby will be 8 in July. But you all have one. I think you have another one on the way. And but what we have found is, yes, I mean, each one of them have their own personality, their own interests. And yes, one of them is my middle one. He is me, which makes it very difficult for me to discipline him because
you're a little an asshole, but I would have done the same thing.
Like, oh man, you can't do that, but shit, you're right. But yeah, so he's, but all of them, I expose them to everything. I speak to my children as if they're adults. I'm probably too hard on them at times, and I have a commitment that I'll never allow one of my children to go to bed upset, and I'll never allow one of my children to arrive at school upset. So if I say anything to upset them before bed or before school, I make sure that I stop it.
Get it out. Yeah.
I apologize. I tell them I love them. I kiss them. I hug them, and I put them to bed or I give them to school. But they listen, and the conversations that they have are very interesting. Like they understand it. And I don't know that they understand what they understand, but they ask great questions about business, and they're very engaged. At a very young age, at 3, I began taking them to what I call gentlemen's dinners. And so we put on sports coats and ties.
I've seen that.
We go to Carrabba's on Kirby.
They all dress alike.
They all dress alike. And
it's so cute.
I don't take other adults with us. Sometimes I'll invite a friend, but I very intentionally don't take other adults because I don't want there to be a children's conversation and an adult conversation. So I'll engage in whatever the conversation that is the children are having, so it remains. The reason why we're doing this is I want you to level up, right? Dressing is 50% of it. You walk in the door at Carrabba's as a 3-year-old with a sport coat and a tie on, people turn around and ask you what you're celebrating. And when you say nothing.
We try to do that with Liam, but Liam's just a psychopath. We just can't. He's just too crazy.
It's tough at 3. It's tough until about 6.
Yeah, he's almost 5
starting
now,
to get
and now like
okay. 50% of the time he's good.
At the new house, I have 2 brown couches and then one really fancy white couch, and everyone's like, "You are crazy for buying this couch with a kid, another kid on the way." I'm like, "Nope, Liam, look at me. First day we moved in, you are not allowed to sit on that couch. You hear me? Do you understand me?" And that was the first time that I really felt like he actually listened and he understood that I was serious. And now every time he walks up, he goes, "Daddy, can I sit on the couch? Because Mommy said I couldn't. Can I show you my feet?" His feet can't be dirty. And he picks up his feet. I'm like, "No, go wash your feet." And then he goes upstairs, washes his feet, and comes back. But he actually really listens now. So I want to start doing the restaurant thing with him too, because I do see you guys do that on social media, and I think that is so important to like normalize them with society and not have a raging psychopath that's screaming and jumping off the walls, or won't eat any of the food at the restaurant. So
well, the key is to do it at a good restaurant that's loud.
Yeah.
So Carrabba's on Kirby makes great food, and it's loud, and so you don't have to worry about be quiet. But I love all of my children equally. I don't care, and I really don't. I don't care what they decide to do when they grow up. I want them to work hard. I want them to be good human beings. But if business, entrepreneurial life isn't for you because it's hard, don't do it. So I don't have any aspirations of my children to join my company or take over my company. I'm not growing a business for my children. I think we talked about this earlier, maybe before we got on. Nothing is for sale, but everything's for sale. So there's no pot of gold at the end of a rainbow for any of my children. Like where I'm not handing the company to anybody. If somebody came along and wrote me a big check, we would sell this company and we would go on and do the next thing. We certainly wouldn't retire, but a healthy level of exposure for my children to business. Right now they'll be out of school for the summer on Wednesday. They'll need to go get a little job in the neighborhood, whether it's cleaning trash cans or mowing lawns or pulling weeds or cleaning windows. We encourage hard work. work in our family is not a punishment. Like I see people punishing their children. Saying,
Chores, no more iPad.
yeah, it's like, go clean the garage. I'm like, no, I want my children to want to clean the garage. Like, I'll give them $5 to go out and clean the garage. So it's wonderful, and having all boys, at least for me, it makes it a little bit easier. Right? Car rides are easy. You can just pull over if they got to pee.
Yeah. Sean and I did that this weekend.
A couple times.
From the little tornado we had. There's
All the
nowhere
gas
to pull
stations
over.
didn't
Everything's
have any
closed.
power.
And he was like, well, Liam, pull down your pants.
Liam
Being right here
peed-
on the freeway.
Peed beside all the gas stations, not inside.
Yeah.
That's how we feel about our son. Well, I do anyways. I hope he goes into business, but I am going to give him all the tools, I think, that he needs to succeed in whatever he ends up doing that I didn't think I had when I was growing up, and I think that they lack going to school. And so hopefully he may, but I think we'll give him the tools to be successful in any career path he decides to choose.
We just pray he's not going to be a little bitch. We
No,
just say,
we're
we hope
not.
he's not going to be a little bitch.
Same thing with you. It's like,
We don't want
you're
a kid.
gonna tell
We don't want a
him
kid
our-
with a handout. We don't.
yeah.
Want
And so that's what's hard is like we grew up in a different scenario. And now my kid's growing up in a lot softer of a life. And so it's like, how do you keep that, instill that hard work ethic where he's not always like sees just like everything's easy or thinks everything's easy. And so that's kind of where we're at. So it's scary a little bit because I don't want, and that would be a sad day for me if he grew up and just had his hand out for everything. And
expectations.
yeah, so I'm gonna do everything in my power to keep that from happening. So, or try to teach him what hard work really is.
Well, that brings me to my last question. I know you've been with your significant other, Michelle. You guys are now married for about 15, almost 20 years, because I feel like you guys started dating around the same time or before Sean and I, so I'm just kind of going by that timeline. You guys have 3 kids together. She's been at home with the kids. You believe in, having the mother of the children raise your kids, not a house full of nannies like Sean and I have chosen that direction. And she recently called out to me, I guess it was probably about a year ago now, and said, hey, I'm interested in opening up a salon in the neighborhood that we live in. It's a great community. We have nothing like this out here. So I was proud of her for seeking something that was missing and trying to create an opportunity out of it. I tried to give her, the school of hard knocks and told her how hard this was going to be. I wasn't sure how much you were helping along the way. So I guess that's my question. Have you told her from the beginning, kind of like you're going to tell your children, hey, you're just going to have to figure this out on your own. I'll here to answer questions if you need it. Or were you hand holding her and helping her get started through all of your experience running businesses? Or has she just done all this amazing work on her own?
Yeah, so the short answer is it's the latter. She's done it all on her own. So Michelle and I dated, I say 15 years. She says 17 years. Let's say 17 years so I can not sleep in the garage tonight. But she says that we dated 17 years. We had 3 children together. When we were pregnant with our first son, we immediately said, okay, this is important and we're going to live together and we're going to love each other. And we ultimately had 3 children together. But one thing that we didn't do is we didn't get married. My mother and father weren't very happy about that. And it was just recently, it was in 2022, we were traveling and I said, I didn't say to her, but I had been thinking about it. I was like, this is just silly. Like, I love this person. We've got 3 children together. We live together.
What am I scared of?
I'm never going anywhere. Why am
I was shocked to see the post. I was. But all the people were shocked about us because I don't know if you know this. Sean and I were together for 13 or 14 years before we got married.
Same scenario.
We just got married maybe a year before you guys.
Yeah.
But
And
the
it
only
wasn't
reason why
that
we
we didn't-
did, well, we would have never gotten married. I don't
Probably.
think. You put a ring on my finger when I was in stirrups in IVF. But we would have never probably gotten married, but we wanted to have a surrogate. And they makes it
I remember
really
that story. I
difficult if
remember
you're not
Michelle
married.
telling me that
So
story.
that's why we ended up getting
But then we
married.
talked about it too. It's like the reason we never probably did either is because
The hassle of the paperwork.
Well, it felt the same. I was like, oh, it's just paper, and so that's probably why. And she
Well, for
didn't
me,
want
I
a
had
wedding
a
because
bad-
she does weddings every weekend. She's like,
Yeah.
we're not having a wedding.
For me, I had a really bad experience in a relationship with someone that I bought things for in my name, and when it didn't work out, I got fucked with all of that stuff. Luckily, I made it out. I survived, but I was scared to financially combine things. And even though Sean and I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast, we don't combine anything. We keep everything. There's nothing in both of our names. One house will be in my name, one house will be in his name. We'll flip flop. I'll buy the next one, and we split almost everything. Not at this very moment, but up until a few months ago, we split everything, even our restaurant bills. I'm sure the people at the restaurants we go to are like, why does she always pay half? Either aren't they married? But we've always split everything. But I think I was just so scared to marriage meant more combination of things, and I was scared to lose the things that I worked hard for. I'm sure he probably felt the same way, but it did take a lot of time, money, and effort to get all of the paperwork and prenups put together and setting up our family, that if something did happen to Sean, I wasn't stuck with paying millions of dollars in taxes to acquire the property that he owned. I mean, I'm sure you probably thought of this too. What happens if something happened to you, your kids, Michelle? They
was
wouldn't
another
be, they
big
wouldn't be
reason.
just given those things if you weren't married, and there was no trust set up. So
It wasn't just the surrogate. It was more of like, hey,
well, the surrogate kind of opened our eyes to more
we have a
things that we
son
were
now,
unaware.
and if something happens, and like she's gonna have to pay tax on.
I was
all
in
my stuff.
Galveston, in your neighborhood, actually, when I got the phone call from you. I remember exactly where I was driving. I was about to turn in, take a right by the golf course, and I remember you calling me and saying, "Yeah, I just found out that, let's just say I owe $100 million or have $100 million in property that's all paid off. You would owe 40 to 50 million in taxes to acquire those, or they just go back to the state." And we had no idea about that either. So we got it all set up, and we're all good now. But yeah, same boat as you.
Yeah.
Just not
around
not
the
being
same
married
time
for that
frame, yeah.
long, and our first kid. Yeah, we had a bastard child too.
Well, I mean, it was very similar. I remember it was 2017. I was traveling to Nepal to go do a Everest base camp hike, and I said, look, I've got children now, and I need to put something in place in case anything happens to me. And so I went and got an attorney and said, I need to put things in place so my dependents are taken care of in the event that anything happens to me. At the time, we weren't married, and I reached out to one of my attorneys, and I know that this, and he said it was a silly transaction, but nonetheless, I reached out to one of my attorneys and said, look, I love Michelle, I love my family, I want a contract written from myself to myself in today's mentality that just tells me that if anything ever bad happens, I have to go and read this contract and remember how I felt to ensure that I didn't do anything negative, right? So bad happens. So say we split up and we cheat on each other. Okay, we're going to separate. When you separate, you're angry and you make decisions out of anger. I wanted a contract that said, I'm happy, and no matter what happens, even if something bad happens, use this as your guide to the decisions that you make. We never had to use that, obviously, but we ultimately we got married. We wanted to be married in the Catholic Church, so we reached out to the priest, and the priest said, well, neither one of you have been married, which means neither of you have been divorced. You're in church every Sunday. You've got 3 children together. You live together. I'll allow you to be married in the Catholic Church. And then he asked, are you considering doing a prenuptial agreement? To which I said, well, I'm not considering it, but my attorneys are considering it. And they tell me that I got to have it. And he says, well, if you get a prenuptial agreement, I won't marry you in the Catholic Church.
Really?
And I said, well, okay, help me understand that. He says, well, then you're going into a relationship with doubt, and I won't do that. Now the priest is also a friend.
Yeah,
right?
see,
So
I don't look at it like that. I don't look at it as doubt. It's just,
and for me,
it's insurance.
It put things in perspective. So I wanted to be married in the Catholic Church, and I felt that I understood his position, and I was fine with it. So we got married without a prenuptial agreement, and I'm fine with it. But we do what you two do as it relates to finances. So finances are one of the largest contributors to divorces in the United States.
I watched it with my parents, and my parents split their money. No more fighting.
Yeah, our finances are completely separate. We don't have joint bank accounts. She hasn't. I ensure that she has what she needs to where she doesn't want for anything. But our finances are completely separate, and she doesn't look at my finances. I don't look at her finances. We don't do anything jointly. I don't run any of my deals by her. She doesn't run any of her deals by me because I don't want to talk business at home. I don't want to know that you went to go eat.
Sean would lose his mind if he couldn't talk business at home. That's all we talk about.
Well,
Sean has to run all the deals by me, not for my approval, just because he wants to get it out and wants to talk about it.
So, but it'd be interesting, your question about, do I look at any of her deals? And the answer is no. She's been a tremendous success. She opened a hot yoga studio many years ago, and that hot yoga studio was an incredible success with a massive asterisk. She came to us one day, meaning me and my director of operations at the time, and she says, I've got 2 checks on my desk at my hot yoga studio that I can't hand to vendors because they will bounce. But I don't understand it. My classes are overflowing. I'm hiring more instructors. I got an incredible business, but I don't have any cash flow. So we asked for some financials, and she took a couple of days to get it to us. And we said, look, let us study these. Come back in 48 hours, and we'll give you some feedback. what we learned in that process was very interesting to us, is that we learned that we were just really good at numbers. Like, it didn't matter what the product was. And so we said, here, you're not going to like your options, but you got two options, A and B.
Cut the fat.
And you got to pick one of them. You can't do like some of them. And option A is just go hand the keys back. Yeah. It's a lease space. You got about $50,000 into the deal, lose the money because you don't have a viable business. Option number 2 is raise your prices, cut your times, eliminate instructors. She had a few questions about why. And the ultimate answer was, you only have one hot yoga studio in Galveston, Texas. There's nowhere for them to go. You have to do this. Anyway, and we said, if you did this in 12 months, here's where we think your business is going to be. It's exactly where it was in 12 months, and she exited the business, and she did very well. During the pandemic, she launched a sunglass line, Bird's Eye, BYRDSI.com. I told her she ought to pay me a royalty for using the name. I've been unsuccessful at collecting any royalty fees. And then she recently opened a beauty bar, so Beauty Bar Galveston or Beauty Bar by Michelle. She kind of uses both names, and she's been a tremendous success. She's hardworking. She's a visionary. I think it's wonderful for our children. They see me working. They see her working. It as you mentioned earlier, it is very challenging. So we as challenging as it is, we sort of pride ourselves on, we're not going to bring in any nannies. We're not going to have a support system. We're going to be mom and dad. That doesn't mean, hey, you're at home cooking 3 meals a day. But it does mean that you're the CEO of the family. And she does a really good job of keeping me in check. She'll tell me, you're going to work too early and you're staying at work too late. You need to be here for this. You need to be present for this. So there's a good yin and a yang to it where she keeps me grounded. And I think that she would.
But now she's giving you a little bit of taste of your medicine with the working leg, got the computer on her lap.
Oh, yeah. Now I'm having to deal with that.
And you're like, now I get it.
She's
Sean and I have
her
gone through that.
business, and I'm like,
inventory, what?
Yeah.
She's told me, she's like, this has been a huge learning curve. We came in there because we sell our cosmetic line there, and during our launch was the first couple of days that she was in there, and I tried to teach her as much as I could. Of course, I can't teach what it takes 20, 30 years of being in this industry and being around it. My mom owned a beauty salon. I was in retail cosmetics. Now I have a salon and a retail store that sells cosmetics. So I'm like, it is a lot, and your staff is going to be a lot, but just managing the people and managing your inventory, you got this. Try to give her all the tools, but a couple days later she goes, you were not lying, this is a lot. I'm working really late every night trying to get everything, ordered and on track. So I knew it was a lot. I knew it probably put a lot of pressure on your family. But the good news is your kids are finally getting old enough that they're almost able to take care of themselves.
Oh yeah,
and it is walking distance from your house. So those are the two things that are key points. I was at 11 years old. My mom owned a business, so she couldn't come pick me up at school, and so I got off the bus and went home by myself. So I know they're getting close to that.
Well, that's where you can be. So at 11, Liam can watch himself and your new child, and you can at least let go of one nanny and save some money. So Hayden
Liam will have the house burned down. They will both be in the pool. She won't know how to swim.
Hayden is 11 now, and within reason, right? If we're in Galveston and it's not late and it's 90 minutes to 2 hours, we can leave Hayden in charge. He's very responsible. He takes that responsibility very seriously, and he likes it. He encourages it. Like, give me the responsibility of watching my younger brothers. And so that's been nice. And that's just happened within the last few months. So it's really cool to see that. So all in all, look, I'm super happy with everything that we're doing. I was telling yesterday, I coach Little League Baseball, and I was telling them, it was end of the season, I was telling my kids on the team yesterday, as you go through life, your priorities change. Things just change, right? And I was telling them about good sportsmanship. But I said, my priority in life right now is threefold. It's dad, it's coach, and it's business. And it's in that order. Now, I've got to execute all of them at a high level because I can't allow any of them to fail. But your priorities change as life changes. And that's my priorities now. So I love being a dad. I love being a husband. I love coaching Little League Baseball. And I love business. And I've just got to find time to do all of them. And we only have 1,440 minutes in a day, and there are never enough minutes. But
talking about numbers, well, everything kind of fell in place. It seems like you living on the mattress, living upstairs. If you would have had kids, then the marriage would have never happened. right?
Correct.
You would have never been home. There would have been no relationship.
100%.
Once you were able to get yourself, to like a standing point, right? Make a little bit of money, take Michelle out on dates. You guys start dating, right? Then you have the kids, and then little by little, you kind of let things go where you hired the right people. But, you asked somebody, would you have done it differently? You couldn't. You couldn't have done it differently. You did what you had to do to survive and to keep the doors open and keep the food on the plates and keep the blue tape off the menu.
Yeah. No,
and
that's
and,
right.
it all worked out, and it was just perseverance and keep going and pushing through, even though, because you believed in it, you believed in the restaurant, you saw it become successful, you knew the numbers well enough to figure it out, and you did it. And look what you done to Galveston.
No, it's been great. I tell people that in businesses, there's really only three things you can do. You can make a lot of money, you can lose a lot of money, or you can create a job for yourself. I try to avoid two of the three. I'll let you figure out which one I try to execute on. But yeah, it takes a lot of hard work, and a lot of people are going to tell you no, and you just got to push through and persevere.
I would agree with that. Well, appreciate you coming on today, Dennis.
We don't want you
Bunch
to
of
be late to
valuable
Little League.
information. Yeah.
Yep, we know you got Little League. We got traffic getting back down to Galveston.
Got
So
practice tonight at 5:30.
I do love your story. I loved hearing the whole thing. I'd heard little bits and pieces from Sean, because Sean just didn't shut up when it was just me and him, shockingly. So I heard a lot about your story and what you were doing with your real estate down there, and I think it's amazing what you do. And again, thank you for coming out, and thanks for letting us stalk you until we got a yes to get you on here.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm sorry. Eventually, I'm going to have an administrative assistant or executive assistant who can help me. But
Any time that we have somebody that's very successful, it is hard to get them on and take a time. I mean, people ask me to do podcasts, and I'm like, I can't. Does this make me money or does this make me money? And you can't look at the short term, it's the long term, more people, familiar with your brand and your restaurants, and maybe remind somebody to go back down to the spot next time they're in Galveston or stay at one of your hotels. So again, thank you for coming, and that's a wrap.